They called her the beast in the sack, dangerous, untamed, impossible. But the day a giant cowboy stood between her and the world, she learned what it felt like to be feared no longer, a broken bar only finally understood. They called her the beast in the sack, but the giant cowboy found his peace the first time he heard her laugh. Folks in Dust Rock Hollow had a gift for twisting truth into legend. By the time most travelers made it down the long road past the canyon rim, they'd already heard of a woman who fought like a trapped mountain lion, slept with a burlap sack as a pillow, and carried more scars than a rusted stovetop kettle. Some said she'd been raised by outlaws. Others swore she'd shot her way out of a burlap bag ambush, beating 3 men senseless with the same sack they tried to capture her in. The truth, as truth often was out here, lived somewhere quiet in between. What no one expected was the way things changed the day a giant cowboy named Amos Calder rode into town with dust on his shoulders and loneliness settled so deep behind his eyes that even the sun seemed to dim when it hit him. Amos was unlike most men who arrived seeking quick drink or quick trouble. He rode slow, tipping his hat at every soul he passed. Children stared at him like he'd stepped out of a tall tale. Horses huffed at his size. Even the old saloon doors seemed to brace themselves before he walked through. He wasn't just taller, he was built like the trunk of a century-old cottonwood, the sort of man whose boots landed on the ground with a certainty that made people turn their heads. His voice held a gentleness that didn't match the revolver on his hip, and though he carried himself like someone who'd fought in wars nobody recorded, he had a softness tucked somewhere in him, the kind that couldn't be hidden by a worn duster coat or the dust of too many lonely miles. He came into Dust Rock Hollow looking for nothing. But as life tended to do, it handed him everything precisely when he stopped expecting anything at all. Amos first heard her before he saw her, a rough, gravelly string of curses tossed at a stubborn wagon wheel outside the trading post. The voice was sharp but not cruel, pained but not weak. It carried the command of someone used to fighting the world and refusing to lose. When Amos turned the corner, he found her kneeling beside the wagon, sleeves rolled up, sun-roughened arms tightening a bolt that refused to listen. She was smaller than Amos expected the infamous beast to be. Strong, yes. Lean in a way only hard living carved a person. Hair braided back with twine. Eyes the color of dry earth after rain. There were faint scars along her knuckles, but not the kind that told of savagery, or the kind you earn fixing things nobody else bothered to repair. She looked up, squinting at the giant who cast a shadow long enough to swallow her boots. "If you're here to gawk," she said, wiping her brow with her wrist, "the show's over. Wheels stuck. My patience too." Amos didn't speak at first. His whole life had taught him that words were fragile things, easily broken if placed in the wrong moment. So he studied the wheel, then the axle, then her face ear just long enough to realize this woman had fought far harder battles than a wagon ever could give. "I ain't here to gawk," he said simply. "Just figured you might want a hand. That's all." She snorted. "Hand? I heard you're carrying 2 bare paws, stranger." He chuckled. "Maybe so. But bare paws fix wagons just fine." She hesitated, then shifted aside. "Fine. If you break it worse, though, you're paying for the whole damn thing." "Fair," Amos murmured, kneeling. And in a single slow, steady motion, he lifted the edge of the wagon just enough to free the wheel from the rut. She stayed, her mouth slightly open, not at his strength, but at the ease with which he did it. As though lifting half a wagon was no harder than dusting off a hat. "Well," she muttered, "that's a broken bar helpful." "Glad to be," he said, releasing the wagon gently. She studied him a second longer. "Name's Tessa Marrow." Amos Calder. Recognition flickered in her eyes. The Calder who hauled 4 wounded miners out of the fire at Silver Bend? He shrugged. "Just did what needed done. And the one who carried a dying horse 6 miles to water rather than let it suffer? He rubbed the back of his neck. Stories get stretched in these parts. Not that one, she said. I heard it from the man whose farm you passed. Said he'd never seen anything like it. The giant cowboy glanced away, embarrassed. Compliments never sat well on him. They slid off like rain on a tin roof. Tessa smirked. You're a strange kind of man, Amos called her. He nodded slowly. Reckon I could say the same about you, Tessa Marrow. And don't you start with the stories you heard, she warned. They're half wrong and half nonsense. He raised his hands. Didn't hear nothing. I don't carry gossip. She studied him again long enough for the wind to shift between them. Well then, she said, maybe you ain't like the rest. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe that's why, from that hour on, their paths kept tangling. Tessa was known as the beast in the sack for one reason alone. Years ago, outlaws captured her by throwing a burlap sack over her head while she was tending her father's mule. Thinking she was helpless, they laughed. And she, half suffocating, half furious, fought so hard she broke free and sent the 3 men fleeing, swinging that very sack at them until they ran bruised and crying into the brush. Someone at the saloon heard the tale, shortened it in a way that made her sound feral, and the nickname stuck like a burr in her boot. She hated it. Amos learned that on his 3rd day in town. But what Amos also learned was that Tessa was kind in quiet ways. She left water outside her cabin for stray dogs. She fixed abandoned saddles and donated them to riders who couldn't afford their own. She gave coins to children selling homemade trinkets. And every evening, she sat alone on the ridge behind the trading post, staring at the horizon like she was waiting for something she'd lost long ago. Amos noticed because he spent many evenings the two, alone with his own unfinished hurts. He never went up there to join her at first, just stood far enough away she wouldn't be bothered, close enough he could pretend he wasn't entirely alone. But one night the silence between them broke. You watching the horizon or me? She asked without turning around. He stiffened. Horizon, mostly. Mostly, she echoed, a smile curling at the corner of her mouth. You can sit, you know. Ridge is big enough for 2. So he sat. They didn't speak for several long minutes. The wind carried sagebrush and dusk across the valley. Coyotes howled faintly in the distance. The sky sank from gold to violet. Tessa drew her knees up, arms wrapped around them. When I was little, she said softly, my pa used to sit with me at sunset. Said the horizon keeps secrets for those who ask politely. Amos tilted his head. What kind of secrets? The kind nobody else listens for. She glanced at him. You got anyone you used to watch sunsets with? He swallowed. Used to have a little brother. California. He'd chase the sun like he thought he could lasso it. What happened to him? Amos took a breath deep enough to steady a tremble in it. Rode out to deliver medicine doer in a storm. Horse slipped. Here his voice tightened. Didn't make it. Tessa's voice softened. I'm sorry, Amos. He nodded slightly, eyes locked on the horizon. Storm took him fast. But grief, a broken bar grief, hangs around slower. Tessa understood that too well. I lost my ma when I was young, she murmured. Fever. One day she was humming lullabies, next she wasn't. Her voice cracked. My pa tried to fill the emptiness, but emptiness don't take kindly to being filled. Amos turned toward her. You're still carrying it. We all carry something, Amos called her. She brushed dust off her pants. But some of us carry it alone so we don't burden no one else. He hesitated. You ain't a burden. She froze, startled by the certainty in his voice. And I ain't one either, he added quietly. Something shifted then. Something subtle. Something neither spoke of but both felt. Over the next weeks, they found themselves gravitating toward each other like planets pulled by some shared gravity. Tessa showed him the ridge where cactus bloomed neon yellow in late spring. Amos taught her how to calm a skittish horse with nothing but a humming tune. She teased him about his towering height. He teased her about the way she rolled her eyes like she was fighting off a smile. People talked, of course. Dust Rock Holland never kept quiet about anything. Some said the giant cowboy had tamed the beast. Others whispered that Tessa finally found a soul who didn't fear the fire in her. But neither Amos nor Tessa listened. They didn't need the world's opinion. They only needed the world's silence long enough to hear their own hearts. Yet life seldom leaves happiness uninterrupted. One sweltering afternoon, riders thundered into Tona, three men with dust-worn hats and desperation carved deep across their faces. They barged into the saloon, slamming doors wide, shouting Tessa's name loud enough to rattle the windows. Word spread fast. These men were brothers of the outlaws Tessa had escaped years ago. They'd come to reclaim their pride, or their revenge, or both. Tessa stiffened when she heard. Amos saw the change in her, the way her posture sharpened, the way anger and dread tangled in her chest. "I can handle them," she said. "I always handled trouble." Amos shook his head softly. "You don't have to handle this alone." She glared. "They came for me, Amos. They'll have to go through me to get to you. Don't be foolish." "Ain't foolish. It's choice." Tessa's breath stilled. She was a woman who fought her own battles because nobody ever stood with her long enough to offer help. No one had ever drawn a line for her, not once. "You don't owe me that," she whispered. "I ain't done it 'cause I owe," Amos murmured. "I'm done it 'cause I care." She shut her eyes. And when she opened them, something inside her had softened. The confrontation came at dusk. The three brothers stood in the center of the street, hands near their holsters, bitterness dripping from their voices. Tessa stepped forward first, but Amos stepped forward faster, standing half a pace ahead of her. The tallest outlaw sneered. "You her keeper, giant?" "No," Amos answered. "I ain't nobody's keeper. But I won't let cowards threaten a woman who's done nothing but defend herself. That beast hurt our kin. That beast fought for her life," Amos said, steady. "And she ain't alone this time." The brothers went for their guns, but Amos moved with the speed of a man who'd lived through this dance too many times. He didn't draw his weapon. Instead he closed the distance in 3 thunderous strides, grabbed the first brother's wrist, and twisted until the gun clattered to dust. Tessa sprang into action beside him, sweeping another brother's legs with a force that knocked the wind out of him. The third hesitated too long. Amos simply stared him down until fear sent the man stumbling to his horse. It ended as fast as it began. The townsfolk spilled into the street, buzzing with adrenaline, praise, shock. Tessa ignored them all and walked straight to Amos. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he replied. "Why'd you?" He inhaled slowly. "Because the world ain't been fair to you. And someone ought to stand beside you for once." Her voice wavered. "You think I needed saving?" "I think," he said gently, "you needed someone who didn't run." Tessa's throat tightened. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from the sudden realization that for the first time in her life, someone matched her strength rather than challenged it. Later, when the street emptied and lanterns flickered on porches, Tessa found Amos on the same ridge where they'd shared so many sunsets. He sat with his hat in his lap, shoulders slumped, eyes tracing the horizon like he'd whispered back every truth he wasn't ready to say. Tessa sat beside him. Close this time, you're close enough, their arms brushed. "You ever think," she said quietly, "that maybe we ain't meant to be alone our whole lives?" Amos swallowed. "Sometimes. I've been alone a long time, Amos. I know. And I ain't easy to love. He turned toward her slowly. Nobody worth loving ever is. Her breath caught. She blinked hard, fighting tears she hadn't shed since her childhood. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. Do what? Let someone in. Amos nodded. Then we take it slow. Quiet. Like sunsets. They don't rush. They don't ask permission. They just a broken bar happen. She leaned her head on his shoulder. He froze for a moment, her shock softening into warmth, then rested his cheek on her hair. I ain't a beast, she whispered. I know, he said. You're the bravest soul in 3 territories. And you? She asked softly. What are you? Amos called her. He smiled faintly. Just a giant cowboy looking for a place to lay down his heavy heart. She closed her eyes. Maybe you found it. Yeah, he murmured. Reckon I did. The wind eased around them, as if giving space to something sacred. Stars began to blink awake across the sky. Somewhere in the distance, a lone coyote called out to one for the first time in a long time. Neither Tessa nor Amos felt alone. The days that followed stitched them together, not with grand declarations but with quiet acts. Amos helped mend her fences and feed stray dogs. Tessa patched his coat and taught him how to find water in dry soil. They laughed more. Fought less. Wandered the ridge together every evening. Folks stopped calling her the Beast altogether because everyone saw what Amos had seen from the start. She was fierce, yes, but she was gentle too, once someone gave her a safe place to rest. One night, under a sky so full of stars it looked like the heavens had cracked open, Tessa whispered, Amos? Yeah? You think we deserve this? Peace, I mean. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. We deserve whatever life gives 2 stubborn souls who kept fighting even when they were tired. She smiled into his chest. You talk like sunshine. You talk like storms, he replied. And storms scare you? No, he said. Storms make the land bloom. Tessa's heart stuttered. She looked up at him, eyes shimmering with the reflection of starlight and something softer, something new. Amos, she whispered, I think I'm fallen. He brushed his thumb gently across her cheek. Then fall. I'll catch you. Tessa once feared, misunderstood, hardened by life, fear let herself finally believe someone could hold every broken piece of her and not flinch. Amos once drifting, lost in grief, found in her a place sturdy enough to anchor his wandering soul. They weren't perfect. They weren't gentle people by nature. They were scarred, stubborn, bruised by life. But in each other they found a quiet, steady love that didn't demand they change, only that they stay. And so, as the sun dipped behind the canyon rim and painted the sky in molten gold, Tessa Marrow rested her hand in Amos Calder's. And the giant cowboy, who had spent a lifetime searching for something he couldn't name, finally understood what he'd been missing. Not peace. Not redemption. Not even love. But a partner whose fire matched his strength. And in Dust Rock Holler, folks stopped whispering old tales. Instead, they spoke of a woman who tamed no beasts and needed none tamed, only someone who stood beside her without fear. And of a cowboy so large he cast a shadow across half the street but carried a heart soft enough to cradle hers. In the end, they found not what legends promised, but what life rarely gave freely.